It is always good to be with you for another night of context, clarity, and conversation. This evening, the president tweeted another upbeat video from Walter Reed. He shared some of what he says he has learned.
So it's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it.
Perhaps those lessons did not include the need to isolate himself from others. After taping this video, he got into a vehicle with other people while infected with COVID-19 to wave to the crowd outside the hospital gates. Today, his doctor said that the president's condition has improved. His oxygen levels had dropped both Friday and yesterday. They declined to answer questions about whether the president has lung damage or pneumonia. Apparently, he might be discharged from the hospital as early as tomorrow. All of this comes just 1 month before the election. Tonight, we'll break down the latest polls, and yes, there are a lot of them, and we'll try to explain how we make sense of what the polls mean. Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence and his wife Karen tested negative again today. They've been tested every single day since the president was diagnosed. He and Senator Kamala Harris are still planning to debate this Wednesday night. We'll discuss that with a debate coach who's won a number of national championships. Also, we'll check in on the Biden campaign's plans for this final month before Election Day. And Congressman Ro Khanna of California shares his thoughts on when a coronavirus relief package will come, if ever. But let us begin with the president's health and the challenges of knowing exactly how he's doing. If you're a bit confused by it all, you're not alone. We've heard a lot in the last 48 hours, and frankly, it's been hard to know just what to believe.
As President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have both tested positive for coronavirus.
The president does have mild symptoms. He continues to be not only in good spirits, but very energetic.
The president, out of an abundance of caution, is going to be heading to Walter Reed Medical Center.
We have not heard anything from a president who usually is extraordinarily communicative.
This historic moment is defined by what we don't know.
NBC News has learned that Trump has a low-grade fever.
He does not require supplemental oxygen and has completed his first dose of remdesivir.
He's also received a single 8-gram dose of Regeneron's experimental polyclonal antibody cocktail.
The questions are only growing. A briefing from his medical team added to the confusion.
Has he ever been on supplemental oxygen?
Right now, he is not on oxygen.
I know you. However, the timeline is getting to be more and more of a mess here.
Just 72 hours into the diagnosis now.
If one does the math, that would put it back to Wednesday morning.
The White House was actually quick to correct, clarifying the president is on, quote, day 3 of his illness, not a full 72 hours.
The White House travel pool saying the president's vitals over the last 24 hours are very concerning and that the next 48 hours will be critical.
Yesterday morning, we were real concerned with that. You know, he had a fever and his blood oxygen level had dropped rapidly.
Over the course of his illness, the president has experienced 2 episodes of transient drops in his oxygen saturation.
Last night, the president's doctor said he did not receive any supplemental oxygen on Saturday, but we now know he did receive supplemental oxygen on Friday.
What is the latest on the president's condition, and who's telling us the latest on the president's condition?
But we're still missing a lot of basic information.
Let's kick off this hour with NBC political reporter Josh Letterman, who is live now outside Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland. Josh, first of all, that motorcade that came through, I'm sure that created quite a stir, even though the president tweeted in the video that he posted that he was going to do it about a minute before he apparently left the hospital.
That's right, Joshua. A lot of his supporters here had not actually had a chance to see that video in the time between it was released and the president's motorcade came out of the hospital and drove down Rockville Pike just behind me past throngs of President Trump's supporters in an unexpected joyride by the president, who is currently suffering from coronavirus and is symptomatic, which we know from all of our doctors and medical experts is the time when someone is extremely contagious. The president traveled in his presidential vehicle with the windows sealed up, meaning he was in the vehicle with drivers from the Secret Service. They were wearing masks during the period of time when we could see the president briefly through the window, but this is raising profound questions tonight about whether the White House has any real commitment to taking the steps that they have said they are going to take to make sure that the coronavirus does not continue to spread, that they do not put more people at risk. It's not like this isn't something that we've already seen play out. Multiple people in and around the White House now have contracted coronavirus, so much so that the D.C. government has said that Rose Garden event a week ago, where many of the attendees have now come down with coronavirus, constitutes the biggest community spread that Washington, D.C. has had of coronavirus in months.
Thank you, Josh. That's NBC's Josh Letterman joining us from Bethesda, Maryland, outside Walter Reed. We'll check back in with you a little bit later in our next hour. Let's continue now with
President Trump hospitalized at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center outside Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland. Just a short time ago, he surprised people gathered outside the hospital with a very brief personal appearance, riding by them in an SUV and then waving at them. Of course, the president is being treated at Walter Reed for coronavirus. He's infected with COVID-19. As you can see in that picture, by the way, the president is not alone in that vehicle. At least two other people are there, both wearing masks and other protective gear. Let's discuss with Jonathan Wackrow. He's our CNN law enforcement analyst, also a former Secret Service agent. Jonathan's joining us on the phone. So these other people in the car and the SUV, we assume, Jonathan, they're Secret Service agents. Clearly, you will do your duty as an agent, but what do these agents think about being asked to participate in what clearly is a political stunt?
Well, thank you for having me on. And first of all, what the agents are thinking right now in this shot, where we're looking at them driving in the car, is that they're just focused on the mission. They're focused on getting the president from point A to point B safely. They are putting their safety and security off to the side to ensure that the president and the office of the presidency are safe. But, Wolf, this goes to the point that I've been saying all weekend, is that actions have consequences. And when we think about this image of the detail leader and the driver of this vehicle, they have families. So there's a second and third order of consequence here, where these agents are now exposed and their families could be potentially exposed. So this is greater than just one individual. So this movement, even though it was relatively short, does directly expose these individuals, to this deadly virus, and in turn can potentially expose their families and others. So again, every action that the president is taking has a consequence, but for the agents themselves, they're mission-driven and they're focused on the duty at hand.
I spent 7 years as CNN's White House correspondent. I dealt very closely with the Secret Service details. The agents, they already are asked to take so many risks, Jonathan, as you and I know. Would you expect in this particular case right now to see any of them resign over the risks like this, to go to a presidential rally, a campaign rally, to deal with coronavirus potentially when you have large crowds, no social distancing, and very few folks wearing masks?
Well, I don't expect anybody to resign. I mean, I think what it will do is it will further deteriorate the morale of the agency, where they feel that their role is potentially marginalized because they have no advocate. They have no one that's looking to protect them. But again, the Secret Service, it's an institution, and the institution is there to not only protect the president, but it's the presidency. And that's what every agent really seeks to protect, is the democracy of the United States. It's our process. It's the political leadership, whether they're Republican or Democrat. So this is a moment in time. It will pass. But trying to get through this moment is obviously very challenging for the agents that have to endure it.
It certainly is. The New York Times, Jonathan, reported that at least 11 people tested positive in August for COVID-19 at the Secret Service Training Center. This is putting new strains on agents right now. What can you tell us about this?
Well, listen, it has in what we've seen is it's been widely reported that through this crisis, dozens of Secret Service agents have been impacted. Some have even been hospitalized. This is a ripple effect. It's a ripple effect on the manpower that's available for the Secret Service to execute not only its protective mission, but also its criminal investigative mission. So the agency can be at strain. The more agents and officers that are out sick due to this virus and contracting the virus has a ripple effect. It has a consequence on the way that they can effectively execute their dual mission.
Talk about the SUV, the presidential vehicle. We hear that it's hermetically sealed against anything that might get inside. But if the president is infected with the coronavirus, how safe is it inside that car for two other individuals, even if they're wearing masks and other protective equipment?
Well, listen, it's a confined space. And I just refer back to what we've heard for months from Dr. Sanjay Gupta, which is, this virus, the rate of exposure is predicated upon time and distance. The more time that you spend with somebody that is infected with the virus at close distance, it increases your risk of being exposed. Look at these images. They are feet from each other. So there's a high probability that these two individuals would be exposed to the virus.
And I wonder if they're going to have to go into quarantine now for 14 days as a result of this close encounter inside that vehicle with the president. Jonathan Wackrow, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, thanks for all your service to our country over the years. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Wolf.
Coming up, the White House insists the president is still in control, but as we learn more details about the medications he's taking, when should power be transferred to the Vice President, Mike Pence? The former Vice President, Dick Cheney's doctor, he's standing by to weigh in. We'll be right back.
In our next hour. Let's continue now with Dr. Kavita Patel, an NBC News medical contributor and former Obama White House health policy director. Dr. Patel, I can only imagine what your thoughts are on that motorcade that rode past the crowd.
Yeah, Joshua, it's pretty cringeworthy, exactly for the points that have been mentioned already. It's literally kind of an extension of, probably one of the most dangerous environments you could be in inside the hospital, because remember, it's not an average SUV that the president is driving as part of the motorcade. That's a pretty fortified driving unit that in an ironic way kind of mimics the seals around one of those kind of negative pressure ventilation rooms inside of a hospital. And it kind of blows my mind, to be honest, because those people, those Secret Service agents, and I couldn't see exactly who else was there, but you could tell that those service agents who are wearing masks, that's not enough protection. And that just concerns me for their health. It concerns me that this is still a president in a White House that is using an extension of a very serious illness and a motorcade ride as part of PR and marketing. It seems like we're seeing this recurring theme of trying to make things sound better. And you heard that from Dr. Conley, not just today, but yesterday as well, in the updates about the president's condition.
Let me get your reaction, Dr. Patel, to something that was said earlier on American Voices regarding one of the medications that the president is being treated with. Watch.
When we put patients on high-dose steroids like that, we monitor them very closely because there's a host of side effects, including impact on their mental health and decision making. You can see delirium or psychosis. You are generally not yourself. There comes a time when patients on this very specific treatment regimen maybe shouldn't be making decisions about what they have capacity to do.
Now, she's referring to a medication called dexamethasone, which is a corticosteroid that is part of President Trump's COVID-19 regimen. What is dexamethasone intended to do, and what do you make of her comment? With the clear understanding that none of us has reliable information about the president's mental health state, so we're not going to try to diagnose the president tonight. But tell us about dexamethasone and what she's kind of referring to here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very common medication. So this is clearly, dexamethasone is a steroid. The doses which have been studied, this is a drug that has been studied and has been shown to be effective, Joshua, in the treatment of COVID-19 patients, but very clearly through the evidence that we have, 4 patients who have either been on mechanical ventilation, on intubation, or have been on oxygen, dependent on oxygen, or have been in the hospital for longer than 7 days. And we've already heard, and we don't have all the pieces that we need to understand, but we've heard the president was on oxygen, and we also have to understand that there must have been a progression in his illness which caused the doctors to put him on dexamethasone. Again, a very commonly used steroid. I prescribed it the other day for a patient that had an allergic reaction, but in a much lower dose. The doses the president is receiving are higher, and I think what the doctor is directly referencing is that on those doses, and actually any dose, but on high doses especially, there's a much higher likelihood of side effects. And side effects that can occur with dexamethasone include depression, psychosis, suppression of the immune system, weight gain, and also a predisposition for high blood sugars or something that's like diabetes.
Quickly, before I let you go, we've gotten a few more answers from the president's medical team. What is the biggest lingering question for you in terms of how the president's doing?
Yeah, incredible questions that remain. Number one, what are exactly the president's viral loads? How much virus is in his body? They're drawing blood. They're looking at what level of infectious virus he does have right now. Are those levels rising or declining? That's important. It tells us where he is in the course of illness. Number two, Joshua, what are the results of those pulmonary scans that we know they've done? Has there been evidence of damage to his lungs, which is also incredibly common in COVID-19, even in healthy patients that are not hospitalized? And then three, the next phase, this critical phase of the hospitalization, or even if he's discharged back to the White House residence, the next phase is really this inflammatory phase that can get really aggressive and result in kind of your body kind of going into a multi-system inflammatory state. But you can tell that by looking at certain lab markers, and we would really need to know what those are. And I do think that those will be critical pieces of information for taking care of the president going forward and for the American public to understand, is he on the recovery trajectory, or is this still a critical watch and wait period, which is where I believe he's at.
Dr. Kavita Patel, always good to see you. Thanks for starting us off tonight. Now, transparency has been an issue with the updates on the president's health. Today, his physician acknowledged the criticism.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the president, that his course of illness has had. I didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true, so here I have it.
Does the White House have a point when it comes to remaining optimistic about the president's health? Is it an issue of national security? NBC national security and justice correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now. Ken, good evening.
Good evening, Joshua.
I'd like to get your sense on the national security implications of this in light of what we just learned from White House spokesman Judd Deere regarding that motorcade that we just saw some video of. Just within the last, he spoke to one of the pool reporters and said of that motorcade, quote, appropriate precautions were taken in the execution of this movement to protect the president and all those supporting it, including PPE, personal protective equipment. The movement was cleared by the medical team as safe to do, unquote. Now, Mr. Deere apparently did not answer questions about whether the drive-by happened at the president's request, whether the president met with anyone in person, or why the pool reporters were not notified and called back to cover this drive-by. These all raise so many more national security questions than we had already raised. This feels like the kind of thing that needs to be buttoned up oh so tightly because there are so many things that could go sideways.
Yeah, you're not kidding, Joshua. Look, in tackling this whole national security question, I think it bears remembering that there are a lot of people that believe that just having Donald Trump as president is a threat to the national security of the United States. And it's not just Democrats I'm talking about. I'm talking about his former defense secretary, Jim Mattis, his former national security advisor, John Bolton. I mean, this is a man who doesn't read his intelligence briefings, who doesn't understand America's role in the world, who doesn't understand the role of NATO. So that's the backdrop. But here we have a president now who is suffering from a life-threatening illness illness, who may, as you say, be on drugs that render him not of sound mind and body, we have this thing called the 25th Amendment that has been used by two other presidents in our history, Ronald Reagan when he was shot and George W. Bush when he had a colonoscopy, a basic procedure where he was under anesthesia for a few hours. He transferred power to Vice President Dick Cheney. Why that has not been discussed in the context of Donald Trump's treatment right now, temporarily transferring power to Vice President Mike Pence, is a mystery to me and to a lot of my national security sources. And generally the bigger picture here, Jonathan, is that, look, Trump appears to be fine in the videos that we're watching. He seems to be mentally sound in those videos. But anytime the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, the man who has the nuclear football, the ability to rain down destruction on nations, is suffering from a life-threatening illness, that is a moment when my sources worry that adversaries will try to take advantage. Right. And there are any number of very dangerous adversaries that we're facing out there, from Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, who may well seize this moment to try to do something. And we have a president who is under treatment in the hospital now, and a vice president who's not in charge. So it's a pretty worrisome situation.
Before we have to move on, Ken, is it safe to assume that there are provisions being taken to ensure the continuity of control in the administrative branch, despite what may happen to President Trump? There are measures being taken, right?
There are continuity of government plans that are always being examined, you know, and 9/11 sort of injected a new life into them. And of course, the fact that Mike Pence has now repeatedly tested negative, that takes a lot of the strain off of the continuity of government plans, because the real concern is what happens if the president and the vice president are incapacitated, and we have to start talking about the Secession Act of 1947 and President Nancy Pelosi, and there could be challenges to that because some people believe that law is unconstitutional. But in terms of like the military chain of command and what the intelligence community is doing, absolutely, that's on autopilot. But at some point, if there's a threat to the nation, the president has to make a decision about how to respond. And so he's got to be in a position to make that decision. And if he can't, then the vice president should be in that position. And we just really don't know to what extent Donald Trump is and will be in the weeks ahead able to do that, Joshua, and that's concerning.
I just want to be clear, when you said President Nancy Pelosi, what you're referring to was the chain of succession. Behind the vice president would be the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, then Chuck Grassley, the President pro tem of the Senate, then the Secretary of State, Treasury, Defense, the Attorney General, and on from there. That's NBC's Ken Delanian. Ken, thanks very much.
That's right.
Still to come, we have heard a lot, as Ken mentioned, about the 25th Amendment, just in case COVID-19 incapacitates the president or worse. What else does the law say about the transfer of power? We'll get to that in a minute. And also, President Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis is making the Biden campaign change its plans. That